In a cozy cafe tucked away in a quiet corner of the bustling city, Emma stood behind the counter, wiping down the glass display. It was a rainy Tuesday morning, and the pitter-patter of raindrops against the window created a calming backdrop. The rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mixing with the sweet scent of pastries. Emma loved this little place, where the world outside faded away with each sip of warmth, but that day was different. Emma prepared the morning rush. She spotted a familiar figure stroll through the door. It was Jason Porter, a well-known political figure making headlines for all the right and wrong reasons. Dressed in a sharp suit, he carried an air of confidence that was almost tangible, but Emma felt a chill run down her spine. She had read about him in the news, and his reputation wasn't spotless. He walked up to the counter, smiling as if he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. He said, his voice smooth. Emma forced a smile, her heart racing. She asked, her tone professional, but inside she felt a knot tighten in her stomach. He leaned against the counter, looking around. "I'll take a black coffee, please, no cream, no sugar." He laughed, but Emma didn't join in. She busied herself with the coffee machine, tapping her fingers against it as it gurgled to life. As she poured his drink, she couldn't help but think about everything she had read. There were whispers of corruption, backroom deals, and promises broken. In a world where trust seemed to be shattered, he was a symbol of discontent, and yet here he was, casually ordering his morning coffee as if he wasn't in the middle of it all. She turned, handing him the cup with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Jason took a sip, savoring it. "You make a great cup of coffee." "Emma," she replied, keeping her eyes down. She felt the tension rising but tried to mask it with a casual demeanor. His smile widened. "Emma, that's a beautiful name." He gestured toward a small table in the corner. In that moment, Emma's heart raced. She hesitated, glancing around the cafe. Most of the tables were occupied, and the cozy atmosphere felt stifling. She didn't want to be seen with him. Instinct screamed at her to refuse. "Actually, sir, it's pretty full today." The smile slipped from his face for just a moment. He looked taken aback, then quickly recovered, trying to play it off. "Come on, just for a few minutes." Her throat felt dry. She glanced over her shoulder, noticing a couple of regulars at the counter stirring their drinks, whispering as they stole glances at Jason. She couldn't shake the feeling that her refusal would draw more attention, and she couldn't bear the thought. A thin line of frustration crossed his brow. "Are you sure?" Emma swallowed hard, fighting against the sudden urge to cave in. She took a deep breath. Her voice was firmer than she felt. He fell silent for a moment, sizing her up as if weighing his next words. The weight of the room pressed down on them both. Finally, he shrugged, tugging at his jacket. "All right, I get it." Emma tried to move on, eager to get back to her routine, but the air felt heavy. Other customers buzzed around, acting as if nothing was happening, but she couldn't shake the anxious energy in the room. The cafe was small. Even the hum of conversation felt like a spotlight on them. As Jason leaned against the counter, she caught a glimpse of a camera flash outside the window. Her heart raced again. A chill went down her spine as she realized there were reporters stationed across the street, some of whom had been following him for days. Suddenly, the tension in the cafe took on a sharper edge. They were waiting for a story, any story. Emma glanced back at Jason, who was oblivious to the media. "He's just another politician in a cafe," she told herself. Yet the more she thought about it, the more she felt the pressure. Giving in to this man could make a splash in the headlines. The thought made her stomach turn, but she couldn't let him see that. "You know," he said casually, "I've always found cafes like this a breath of fresh air in the midst of politics." Emma nodded politely, feeling the urge to press him further. He tilted his head, amused by the awkwardness of the question. "Mostly I rally for change. I have strong beliefs, Emma." Emma wanted to challenge him, to ask about the promises he had broken, the lies spun around his campaign. But part of her felt sorry for him. His facade was slipping. The carefully put-together man she saw was slowly unraveling. Behind his confident exterior, there was a hint of vulnerability that pulled at her heartstrings. In that moment, a loud crash echoed through the cafe as a tray slipped from a waitress's hand. The sound made everyone jump. Emma instinctively turned to her colleague, who looked horrified. The clatter of dishes faded away, replaced by nervous laughter. Jason seized the opportunity to shift the conversation. "You see, this is life. It's unpredictable, messy." Emma couldn't hold back now. "But doesn't that messiness hurt people?" The words tumbled out of her mouth before she could stop them. He straightened up, taken aback. "Wow. Maybe, but that doesn't get us very far if the people in charge forget the reason they're there," she replied, her voice steady. The moment hung in the air, charged with something more profound than just a conversation. It felt real, raw, and brutally honest. She could see the shift in his eyes, the realization that she wasn't just another barista serving him coffee. "I didn't expect this from you," he said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "And that's part of the problem," Emma shot back. Her voice was unwavering. At that moment, the door swung open, and Emma's heart raced again as another group of reporters entered, their cameras flashing. The air became electric. Their presence swirled around Jason, heavy with the chaos of public life. She felt that familiar feeling of being trapped. Jason turned to face them, his jovial demeanor shifting into something more serious. He knew they were there for him, and she could see that mask slipping away. He was no longer just a man ordering coffee. He was a man under scrutiny, a man whose every word could be twisted into something sinister. One of the reporters shouted, "What do you have to say about the allegations against you?" All at once, the room felt too small. Emma's heart pounded as she watched Jason compose himself, adjusting the cuffs of his sleeves. The charm was back, and he turned to the reporters, glancing briefly at Emma as if searching for an ally. "Unfortunate that the media thrives on negativity," he replied smoothly. He took a deep breath, pulling himself upright. The confidence returned, the facade creased into place. Watching him transform reminded Emma of the duality of people, the faces they wear and the truths they hide. She wanted to shout, to encapsulate all her frustrations into one bold statement, but instead she stood frozen, gripped by the moment. The reporters continued firing questions, their flashes popping like fireworks. The sounds of clicking cameras mixed with the chatter of patrons in the cafe. Emma felt lost in a whirlwind, trapped between two worlds, the world of ordinary life and the chaos of politics. "Do you think you can win the election after this?" Another reporter pressed, the tone unforgiving. Jason struggled to maintain his composure, and Emma saw a flicker of real fear in his gaze. The facade was cracking, and for a fleeting moment, she felt a sliver of empathy for him. Everyone at their core wants to be understood. In the midst of the chaos, she made her choice. She stepped forward, her voice steady. "Excuse me, everyone," she said, surprising even herself. The buzzing questions from the reporters quieted momentarily. "This is a cafe." The reporters blinked at her, incredulous. Jason turned to her, surprise mixed with gratitude filling his eyes. Emma took another breath, feeling a rush of courage. Jason might have his flaws, like all of us, but we're all human. For a heartbeat, the room fell silent. Then, as if someone turned on a switch, the air shifted once again. The words hung in the space between them, echoing with raw honesty. Slowly, the reporters stepped back, their questions faltering, unsure of how to respond now that the spotlight had shifted. Jason looked at Emma with a mix of astonishment and respect. The tension began to lift, and as the microphones turned away from him, the moment transformed. Emma could feel a sense of relief washing over her. The cafe filled with murmurs instead of shouts, soft conversations blooming around them. For the first time that day, it felt like a safe space again, a refuge amid the chaos of their realities. Jason took a step closer to her, earnestness shining in his demeanor. "Thank you, Emma." His voice was low, filled with sincerity. She offered him a small smile, feeling a flicker of warmth in her chest. "Just remember that the truth matters." He nodded, genuinely considering her words. As he looked past the reporters now retreating outside, something shifted in his gaze. Maybe, just maybe, he could rise above the noise. With every word exchanged that day, Emma realized something deep. A connection was born not just between her and Jason, but between all people, flawed and vulnerable. They were all seeking understanding, and in that small cafe, perhaps they had found a glimpse of it. Not every moment ends in resolution, and not every conflict is easy to confront. But in standing firm, whether at a counter or in life, sometimes the heaviest burdens lighten just a little. And perhaps in the eyes of the world waiting outside, their stories would now be narrated differently. The bell above the cafe door chimed softly as it swung open, but Sophia felt a sense of dread spilling into the warm, cozy space. A shiver danced down her spine as she looked up from behind the counter. There, standing in the doorway, was Richard Hawke, a name that echoed through newsprint and television screens across the nation. At first glance, he looked charming enough. Dressed sharply, his hair neatly combed back, he exuded an aura of confidence. But Sophia knew better than to be swayed by appearances. It wasn't just his reputation that made her uneasy. She'd seen footage of his smirking face as he sidestepped questions from reporters. She knew what lay underneath that well-crafted image. As he stepped inside, the air around her shifted. Other patrons continued sipping their coffees, absorbed in their conversations, blissfully unaware of who had just entered their little sanctuary. But Sophia felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her, like an unseen hand squeezing her heart. She forced herself to smile, though it felt strained. She asked, keeping her voice neutral. He approached the counter, his eyes scanning the room, taking in the art on the walls and the soft chatter that filled the air. "I'll have a double espresso," he said, flashing a grin that seemed rehearsed. Sophia's heart raced as she hesitated, her mind racing for the words she needed to say. She poured the shot, the rich aroma filling the space between them. But before handing it over, something stirred in her chest, a sudden rush of defiance bubbling to the surface. "Actually," she said, meeting his gaze. His smile faltered, disbelief flickering across his features. "What do you mean?" "It's not about the coffee," she said firmly. "You know why people are staring." Each word felt heavy but empowering. She stood her ground, feeling the energy shift around them. His expression darkened, and for a moment, Sophia saw the cracks in his polished demeanor. "Do you see the people here? That may be so," she replied, a newfound strength coursing through her. "But you're not just anyone, you're Richard Hawke." For a heartbeat, they both held each other's gaze, tension crackling in the air. She could see a flicker of anger in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced with feigned calm. "You're making a mistake," he said coolly, though an edge crept into his voice. "I don't think so," she stated, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt the eyes of her regular customers now glancing between them, some whispering, others frozen in surprise. The moment swirled around them, and she felt as though she was standing at the center of a storm. As she turned back to the espresso machine, she caught sight of movement outside the large window. Her heart dropped as she recognized the familiar shapes: cameras, reporters, and more. They were stationed like vultures, waiting for a story to unfold. All those flashes, all those eyes hungry to capture a moment of drama. Suddenly, her stomach twisted with anxiety. Had she just stepped into something bigger? Would refusing him bring more trouble into her life than she ever anticipated? Richard took a step closer, lowering his voice. "You really think you can afford to stand up to me in this moment?" Sophia blinked at him, confusion dancing with caution. "I have connections, people who can ruin lives, even a small cafe like this," he said, his voice smooth like silk, but his eyes held a fire. "Don't make an enemy out of me." Panic threatened to overwhelm her, but in that moment she also felt something swell inside her. She was standing up for herself, for her values, and maybe even for the people who had chosen this cafe as their refuge from the chaos of the world. "You're just a man, a flawed man who's made bad choices," she replied, holding her ground despite the fear casting its shadow. The silence stretched as Richard processed her words, and in that blink of an eye she could see the war waging in his mind. He was accustomed to an easy smile and a more agreeable response. Yet here in this small cafe, a place where she felt safe, he was pushed off his pedestal. With each heartbeat, the tension unfurled until it felt like a drum that everyone in the cafe could hear. He took a deep breath, letting that fire of resolve course through her veins. "If you want your coffee, you'll have to take it to go," she declared, gesturing toward the door. For a second, he looked ready to argue again, but in that quiet moment, the realization must have dawned on him. Outside, the press was still there, still waiting, still hungry for a morsel. They could explode this defiance into a bigger story, and everyone would see his true colors, or perhaps even her bravery. Richard's expression shifted. He straightened his shoulders, plastering back on that familiar, charming smile. "Fine," he said finally, his voice dripping with false cheer. Sophia poured it, feeling the weight lift slightly as she handed it to him. "Here you go," she said, her voice steady. He held the cup but didn't make a move to leave immediately. Instead, he leaned in closer, his voice lowering. "You think this is over? You've made your choice today, Sophia." With that final jab, he turned to leave, his polished demeanor reappearing as he stepped out into the chaotic world outside. Cameras flashed, eager hands reached out, and reporters scrambled to catch him. The tide of attention shifted from the cafe to him, a swirl of questions erupting like an unexpected storm. Sophia stood still behind the counter, watching as he navigated through the crowd, donning his mask of charm once more. The press was all-consuming, eager to draw out the stories that had eluded them. As voices rose in volume, she felt a mixture of fear and a rush of adrenaline coursing through her. She couldn't help but wonder if she had just committed some cardinal sin by refusing him. What awaited her now? Just then, one of her regulars, a man named Tom who had been quietly working on his laptop, stood up. He approached her, his gaze steady and reassuring. "You did good, Sophia," he said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "Thanks," she whispered, though the words felt small compared to the churning inside her stomach. The cafe crowd began to murmur amongst themselves, some nodding in agreement with Tom while others looked nervous. The energy in the cafe began to shift again. As patrons exchanged glances that questioned whether they should feel afraid or proud, Sophia felt the need to break the tension. She called out, her voice carrying through the room. It was a brave attempt, an invocation for normalcy amidst uncertainty. The buzz settled slightly, and one of her regulars raised a hand, requesting an iced mocha. Another customer chimed in for a chai latte, and just like that, she found her rhythm returning. In the back of her mind, thoughts of Richard loomed large, but the gravity of those thoughts began to lighten as the warmth of her cafe enveloped her. "I'm sorry for the scene," she said, addressing everyone. Someone chuckled softly, lightening the mood further. "We all have our moments," a woman chimed in. The atmosphere shifted, swelling with newfound camaraderie. The warmth of community wrapped around her, and despite the storm brewing outside, Sophia felt an electrifying sense of strength surge within her. In those moments spent crafting drinks and teasing laughter from her customers, she realized she was not alone. They were all in this together, sharing a small space of peace while the world outside moved unpredictably. As the afternoon rolled on, the chaos outside began to settle. The media, having fed off the drama for a bit, were slowly drifting away, leaving Richard to continue facing the consequences of the decisions he had made. Later, as the sun began to set, casting a warm golden light through the cafe windows, Sophia stepped outside for a breath of fresh air, the cool air greeting her like an old friend. She looked around, and the streets were strangely quiet now. The crowd that had gathered earlier had dissipated, leaving only the chill of the evening air. Her mind drifted back to the confrontation, and she felt a mix of satisfaction and uncertainty. Maybe it hadn't all been in vain. Perhaps she had sparked something more than just a moment of defiance. Perhaps she had ignited conversation, stirred thought among her community, and made them realize that standing up for what's right wasn't just a matter of choice but a necessity. And in that moment of self-reflection, Sophia knew she had carved out a piece of her truth in the chaotic world around her, a truth that echoed in the sentiments of those who chose to sit within her cafe, caffeinating their souls with conversations that mattered. She took a deep breath, feeling the chill lifting slightly, and stepped back inside. The cafe was alive with chatter and laughter again, the voices stitching together a beautiful tapestry of resilience. As she moved behind the counter, pouring another cup of steaming coffee for a waiting customer, Sophia understood something profound. In a world filled with turmoil, sometimes all it takes is a single act of courage to spark something beautiful. And that courage, it starts just like a cup of coffee with a simple choice to stand tall. The bell above the cafe door chimed, a cheerful sound that clashed with the tension looming in the air. Mia stood behind the counter, eyes focused on the steaming cups of coffee before her. It was just another ordinary Tuesday morning, or so she thought. A light drizzle pattered against the windows, making the atmosphere cozy. But when the door swung open, everything changed. In walked Adam Kane, a name that sent whispered ripples through the community. A tall man with sharp features and an air of charisma, he was not just any customer, he was a local politician, reputed for his charm and his scandals. Mia's stomach churned as she caught sight of him. She had read about his controversial policies and the recent allegations clouding his reputation. The stories twisted the truth, but they also compelled her not to welcome him with open arms. He made his way to the counter, his confident smile flashing like a beacon. "Hey there, I'll have a cappuccino, please," he said, standing too close for comfort. Mia's pulse quickened as she glanced outside through the glass. The street was empty, eerily quiet except for a couple of early morning joggers. "Sure, coming right up," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. With every pulse of the espresso machine, she felt a growing weight bearing down on her. As she foamed the milk, her mind churned with thoughts of truth and integrity. She knew what this man represented. She glanced at the single table in the corner, still unoccupied, the one place left where he could have a moment away from the spotlight. Once finished, she turned back to him, forcing a smile that barely reached her eyes. "Thanks," he asked, already moving toward an empty spot. In that instant, something inside Mia snapped. "Actually, I don't think I can let you sit here," she blurted out, her own surprise mingling with certainty. He halted in his tracks, disbelief flickering across his face, quickly masked by that slick smile. "What, it's just coffee?" "It's not just that," Mia said, her voice firm and clear. "You know why people are talking about you." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Come on, Mia, everyone deserves a place to relax, just a few minutes." "No, Adam," she replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I'm sorry, but this cafe is a safe space." For a moment, silence enveloped them, and time slowed as those powerful words hung in the air. The buzz of the cafe seemed to fade. A couple of regulars looked over, wondering what was happening. Inside, Mia felt panic and pride collide. She knew she was risking confrontation, perhaps even the ire of a man who could cast a long shadow. Adam's smirk faltered, and in that instant, she saw a flicker of vulnerability beneath the bravado. "You really think you can refuse me?" He leaned in slightly, an edge in his voice. Mia was taken aback but held her ground. "Maybe you can, but I can't ignore what's right." Just then, she noticed something out of the corner of her eye. Shadows moved outside, and as she turned her head, her stomach dropped. A small group of reporters had gathered across the street, cameras and notebooks in hand. They'd been waiting, and now they were watching. Mia's heart raced. She remembered the headlines she had read, the criticism swirling around him like a dark storm cloud. This was more than just a simple decision, it was becoming a spectacle. "Look outside," she said quietly, not breaking eye contact. "They are here for the drama." For the first time, Adam seemed to fully grasp the implications. He turned away from her, glancing out the window as the reporters adjusted their cameras. The realization struck him like a thunderbolt. This wasn't just coffee. This was about image, about power and perception. But instead of retreating, he took a step back, the gears in his mind visibly turning. His voice lowered, full of intensity. "This isn't just my image at stake. This is about what people believe in." Mia took a deep breath, standing tall, her heart pounding in her chest. "No, Adam." They stood there locked in a moment, the world narrowing to just the two of them. Adam's expression hardened, but Mia felt empowered, unyielding. In that small cafe, the silent weight of so many choices pressed against them. He took a moment to gather himself, his charming facade morphing back into place. "All right, fine, I won't sit here," he said, forcing a smile, "but I won't forget this." As he turned to leave, the tension in the air began to dissipate, the internal conflict that had raged moments earlier morphing into a new calm. She felt an odd mixture of relief and dread. Had she just made a powerful enemy, or had she taken a powerful stand? As Adam stepped outside, he was met with flashes of cameras and eager reporters, questions flying at him like arrows. "Mr. Kane, what happened inside?" For a moment he paused, realizing the very spectacle he had wanted to avoid was unfolding at that moment. The very hesitation he'd shown inside became fodder for the hungry media outside. "Just a misunderstanding," he said, plastering on that polished smile again. Mia watched from the window, heart pounding as he feigned confidence while navigating the crowd. Would the world outside see the truth, or would they twist the narrative to fit their needs? She sensed a shift, even from a distance. Everything had changed. As the morning shifted into afternoon, business continued and the media circus drew away. Yet her mind remained engaged, replaying the confrontation over and over. The feeling of standing against someone who dwarfed her in stature, both literally and metaphorically, stirred a sense of exhilaration deep within her. "You really stood your ground, Tom," a regular said, breaking her thoughts. He leaned against the counter with a grin. "Thanks," she replied shyly, smiling back. "It took guts, Mia," he continued. "Most wouldn't have the courage to confront a man like him. You did, and it made a difference." His words resonated deeply. She had done more than just stand up for herself. She had defended the values her cafe represented. In a world riddled with gray areas, she had carved out a moment of conviction. As the days passed, shockwaves rippled through the community. News reports covering the incident flourished, each one painting her as both brave and audacious. Mia found herself gaining more attention than she could have imagined. Her cafe was buzzing with patrons seeking to share their thoughts on the confrontation. People came in not just for coffee, but to engage in meaningful dialogue. Someone asked one morning as Mia filled an order. Mia laughed, though it was tinged with disbelief. "I didn't do it for the attention, But the media frenzy wasn't just flattering. It stirred whispers of accountability, of change, and she found herself at the center of it. Each visit, each conversation was a reminder that she had ignited something much larger than herself. The cafe became a hub for discussions about integrity, accountability, and community resilience. Then came the moment she least expected. A day later, she received a call from a local news station asking for an interview. "We want to hear your side directly, Mia." Standing in her tiny cafe, she felt a sudden surge of fear and skepticism. She could sense the pressure mounting. This wasn't just about coffee anymore. She wondered aloud. "You won't," Tom said, his voice steady. "You know why you did it." When the camera crew arrived, she felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. They set up lights and microphones around the quaint space that had become a canvas for her thoughts. As the interview began, emotions surged through her like a wave. "I wanted to create a space where people felt safe and valued," she said, her voice strong. They asked her about her experiences, the confrontation, and the fallout from it all. As she spoke, Mia felt more liberated with each answer. "Everyone has their moments of standing up for what's right," she declared. The interview wrapped, and as the crew packed up, Mia felt an unfamiliar rush of accomplishment. It wasn't just about her actions anymore. It was about planting seeds in her community, igniting conversations that could lead to meaningful change. As she returned to her bustling cafe, patrons greeted her with applause and nods of approval, acknowledging her courage. The air felt electric, alive with potential. Weeks turned into months, and though Adam Kane's name lingered on the lips of many, conversation had shifted. A spark of accountability began to fill the air, from the sidewalks to City Hall, igniting discussions that had sat dormant for too long. Mia became a beacon, not because of some grand deeds or heroic gestures, but simply for standing firm in her beliefs. It became clear that a small cafe could resonate beyond its walls if those within dared to stand tall. In moments of uncertainty, she remembered that encounter, the challenge she had faced, the fear that threatened to engulf her. And in that memory lived the lesson that sometimes, standing up for what is right doesn't require power or prestige. It takes a single moment of courage, a cup of coffee, and the willingness to turn ordinary days into extraordinary actions. Her story was a reminder that small choices create ripples, leading to waves of change. And they all began from a simple refusal to seat someone who was in the wrong. As she poured another cup of coffee, she felt a renewed sense of hope. In the end, every small stand taken could eventually lead to something grand, and that was more powerful than any fleeting moment of fame. The door swung open with a sharp clang, surprising Mia as she wiped down the counter. The bell above jangled, cutting through the ambient noise of the cafe, but the bright morning light felt heavy all around her. She looked up to see him step inside, a familiar face, one that had been on every news channel for weeks. Martin Salas, a rising politician known for his charismatic speeches and controversial decisions. He cut a striking figure, but Mia could see through the facade that many others admired. As he walked toward her, confidence radiated from him like heat waves on a summer day. He said, flashing a smile that many might find charming, but Mia held a different perspective. She knew about the recent allegations swirling around him, the whispers of corruption that had stained his reputation. She'd been reading the headlines, feeling the weight of betrayal echo from the newspaper pages. "Morning," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'll have a coffee black, please," he said, leaning casually against the counter. His posture was relaxed, almost too relaxed for someone under scrutiny. As she poured the coffee, her mind whirled with the decision she was about to make. The cafe was her sanctuary, a space where her customers felt welcome. Would serving him compromise the values she held dear? What message was she sending by offering him a seat in her cafe? Once the cup was full, Mia placed it on the counter. She took a breath and built up her courage. Actually, the smile flickered from his face, replaced with disbelief. "Excuse me, it's just coffee," he replied, confusion bubbling in his tone. He leaned forward slightly, invading her space, an intimidation tactic, perhaps. "No, it's not just coffee," Mia said, her voice firmer now. "You know the commotion you've caused. People are uncomfortable." He straightened up, a hint of anger sparking in his eyes. "Come on, Mia, I'm just trying to enjoy a quiet moment away from the chaos outside. Maybe you need it, but my customers deserve a safe space," she countered. Each word felt like a stone, heavy and deliberate. She could feel the cafe's energy shifting as other customers began glancing their way, whispering amongst themselves. In an outburst, he leaned closer. "You realize I could make this your problem, right? People like me don't just walk away." Facing that kind of power was unnerving, and Mia's heart raced. She wasn't used to confrontation, especially not with someone who had so much influence. Yet the thought of bending to his will gnawed at her. Would her silence condone his actions? Then a fleeting thought crossed her mind. She glanced quickly out the cafe window and her stomach dropped. A small throng of reporters stood outside, cameras poised and eager. They had been waiting for him, hungry for a story, any story to unfold. Suddenly the tension felt heavier, pregnant with possibility and peril. She clenched her fists beneath the counter, the reality of the situation dawning on her. "I see them, and I won't be a part of your escape from the scrutiny you've created," she declared, her voice breaking but resolute. His facade faltered, eyes darting toward the window. The glint of camera lenses reflecting sunlight pierced through the glass. She recognized a shift within him, fear fluttering just beneath the surface of arrogance. He suddenly looked human, vulnerable in a world of high stakes. "Please," he started, hesitation creeping into his tone. But the weight of Mia's conviction hovered between them, a silent challenge he wasn't prepared to face. "I'm not going to serve you," Mia stated, each word falling like the last hammer strike to seal a coffin. She felt exhilarated, liberated even, but also terrified. What had she just done? He stepped backward, rubbing the back of his neck, frustration seeping into his expression. "Fine, but you'll regret it," he spat, trying to regain his composure as he turned to leave. His voice dripped with unspoken threats, but Mia stood firm. This was her cafe, her principles, and she would not let his presence taint it. As he pushed the door open, he paused, glancing over his shoulder. With that, he stepped into the waiting throng of reporters. Outside, shouts erupted. "Mr. Salas," the crowd surged toward him like a wave, hungry mouths asking questions, lenses grabbing snapshots. Mia's heart raced. She was suddenly thrust into an unforeseen role, not just the barista, but an unwitting participant in a story that had grown far larger than her little cafe. She watched as he slipped into the spotlight, engaging with the reporters with practiced charm, but his eyes reflected something else, fear of losing control, of being stripped bare. She felt a wave of mixed emotions wash over her. Elation mingled with dread. Had she just raised the stakes? People were already buffering their conversations with shocked murmurs. "Wow, Mia, you really told him," said Tom, a regular who had been sipping coffee at his usual corner table. The surprise in his voice carried a flicker of admiration. "I didn't want to be a part of it," she replied, shaken. Tom shook his head, leaning in closer. "You stood up for what you believe in, that matters. You drew a line, but did it?" As the day unfolded, Mia was drawn into a whirlwind of emotions, doubts creeping in like shadows. Questions about her choices haunted her thoughts. The news stations were abuzz with coverage of the confrontation. Her cafe, her haven, was now a platform for commentary, a stage for debates that echoed through the community. Those who flocked to her cafe came not just for coffee, but to share their thoughts on the encounter. They buzzed with excitement about someone standing up against a figure like Adam Salas, a symbol of everything they felt was wrong. But was it bravery or stupidity? With every comment, every glance towards the door, her anxiety deepened. Images of the crowded media outside haunted her. Each time she looked out, reporters prowled like wolves, sniffing out the scent of controversy, ready to twist any narrative into something sensational. Days turned into weeks, and Adam's scandals spiraled further. The media dunked into details, uncovering layers of lies like peeling back an onion. Mia watched in disbelief as public sentiment shifted, the tide turning against him bit by bit. Each new headline reverberated with echoes of her choice, while dine-in customers discussed it as if it were an epic tale unfolding. But what happened next defied her expectations. News outlets began to cover her cafe more frequently, labeling it as a beacon of hope. The cafe that stood up, they called it. Her small establishment took center stage, a symbol of community resilience amidst rising injustice. Paradoxically, what she had feared might destroy her cafe propelled it into the spotlight. In the midst of it all, Mia also felt the weight of responsibility growing. "You have to be cautious, Mia," one customer urged her, concern flooding their voice. Mia replied, fueled by conviction, "We need more people speaking out." The more they spoke, the more she realized how many people felt powerless in a world ruled by the powerful. They wanted change but didn't know how to invoke it themselves. Here she was, standing on a precipice that many were afraid to approach. Then came the day her coffee shop became more than just an establishment. It became a gathering place, a refuge for change, embodying a larger movement. People started bringing in signs, declarations of support, with each cup of coffee fueling conversations. "We can do better," they said together. With her newfound platform, Mia organized community meetings. Guest speakers arrived to discuss accountability in politics, emphasizing the importance of integrity at every level. Soon, local activists began frequenting the cafe. Her shop had transformed from a quiet corner into a hub of innovation and discussion. Then came the phone call that she never expected. A producer from a major national news network wanted to feature her story on their primetime slot. "Your story is resonating with viewers across the country," the producer explained. "We want to highlight the power of ordinary people standing up against corruption." Mia's heart raced. Could she handle the spotlight? What if it turned against her? Yet deep down, she realized that this was a golden opportunity, a chance to amplify not just her voice, but the voices of many who had joined her. When the crew arrived, the cafe buzzed with energy. She felt a blend of anxiety and excitement as they set up cameras and lights. Mia's mind raced as the cameras rolled. She was standing at the intersection of her past self, someone who feared confrontation, and her newly forged self, a strong woman who had taken a stand. With each question, she spoke candidly about her experiences, about feeling powerless at first, but realizing that small acts could ignite larger movements. "Individual choices matter," she stated. "We all have the ability to speak up." After the filming wrapped, the producer looked pleased. "This is going to inspire so many people." "You're a breath of fresh air in a heavy world," he said, leaving her with a sense of accomplishment. As the feature began to circulate, people from all walks of life reached out, sharing how her story had inspired them to take a stand in their own communities. The cafe became a mecca for change, a safe harbor where conversations and ideas flowed freely. Mia felt overwhelmed, but in a good way. It was a whirlpool of energy and excitement, yet the past still loomed. She couldn't help but wonder about Adam's next move. Would he retaliate, or would he fade into obscurity, a victim of his own choices? Weeks passed, and the narrative surrounding him twisted and turned. Pressure mounted, and tabloids began forecasting his downfall. One evening, just as Mia was closing the cafe, the door swung open again. Her heart sank as she acknowledged the figure stepping through Adam once more. He looked disheveled, a stark contrast to the confident man who had visited her before. Whatever aura of power he once carried felt stripped away, replaced with something much more fragile. He asked, his tone devoid of bravado. Mia froze, unsure whether to invite him in or to slam the door shut, but curiosity nagged at her and she slowly nodded. "Sure," she replied cautiously, motioning toward a table in the corner. He sat down, his hands trembling slightly. "I've messed up, Mia." "Everything's crumbling," he admitted, the bravado evaporating from his countenance. "I didn't take you seriously when you refused to seat me that day. I thought it would blow over." She studied him, emotions swirling inside. The vulnerabilities he had tried to mask were spilling out now. "You're paying the price for your choices," she said, her voice steady. "I know I should have taken responsibility," he said, longing in his eyes. "I realize now how important spaces like this are. The conversations you foster here, they matter." Mia felt a flicker of something, maybe compassion or understanding. "It's never too late to change, Adam. You have a choice now." He nodded, remorse washing over his features. I want to be better." In that moment, she grasped the complexity of humanity. People could err, but they could also learn and grow. "I can help you, but only if you're willing to truly change," she replied assuredly. "It takes action." Adam took a deep breath, vulnerability painted on his features. As they conversed, dialogue opened like a blossoming flower. What had begun as a confrontation morphed into a conversation about responsibility, redemption, and second chances. Each word exchanged became a thread, weaving a new fabric of understanding. Mia realized that sometimes the most intimate change happens when we are faced with the hardest truths, and how sometimes those truths come from the most unlikely sources, like a man who once stood in the way. As they spoke, she felt the walls around them slowly come down. It reminded her of the world they existed in, one of complexities, yet one where courage and compassion could reignite hope. The cafe remained a sanctuary, weaving threads of connection as she continued to foster dialogue while also aiding in his journey. The media buzz had become a force for good, paving new paths for community conversations on accountability, transparency, and healing. In each cup of coffee poured and every story shared within those walls, Mia had undeniably made a mark. She had transformed not just her cafe, but the entire community, proving that even ordinary moments of refusal, could catalyze extraordinary change. As she served coffee and listened to the laughter around her, she realized that the journey wasn't just about standing strong against one man. It was about building bridges, allowing healing, and knowing that even in the depths of despair, there was hope for new beginnings. Every refusal could lead to something magnificent and life-changing. The world was watching, and they were no longer afraid to take a stand together. The door swung open with a soft jingle of the bell, but the atmosphere inside the cozy cafe shifted suddenly as soon as she saw him. Julia froze behind the counter, her hand gripping the coffee pot. There he was, Mark Trenton, local politician, the man whose name had become synonymous with scandal. Just days earlier, she had watched news reports covering his latest controversy, a swirl of accusations that had left the town buzzing with uncertainty. As he stepped inside, confident and dressed sharply in a tailored suit, Julia felt a mix of dread and disbelief. How could he think he could walk in here as if nothing was happening? She glanced around at the other patrons, their faces a mix of curiosity and discomfort. He greeted, his smile wide, almost gleeful, as if he hadn't just become the center of a media storm. "Sure," she replied, forcing a smile that felt like a mask. She started to pour, each drip echoing in her mind as she weighed her options. Shouldn't she at least try to be polite? But the thought of serving him made her skin crawl. She remembered the stories, the broken promises, the betrayal. As she turned back with a steaming cup in hand, something deep inside her sparked. "Actually, I need to talk to you first," she said, her words tumbling out without permission. He blinked, surprise flickering across his face. The easy demeanor was slipping, and Julia felt a rush of adrenaline. You can't just waltz in like nothing happened. People are talking about you, and frankly, it makes them uncomfortable. Each word felt like a drumbeat, steady and resonant. Mark's smile faded, and beneath the surface she could see the first signs of anger mounting. "Are you serious right now? It's just coffee." The word was firm, cutting through the atmosphere like a knife. He stepped closer to the counter, the tension thick enough to slice. "You really think you can refuse me? I'm not just some guy, you know who I am." Julia felt her heart race, but this was her moment. She straightened her posture and met his gaze, unblinking. "You're a person who has made bad choices, and those choices affect others." For a heartbeat, time seemed to stand still. Across the cafe, conversations hushed, and all eyes turned toward them. The energy vibrated, laden with uncertainty and the kind of tension that crackled in the air. And then, from the corner of her eye, she spotted movement outside. A small group of reporters had gathered, cameras in hand, waiting expectantly. Julia's stomach dropped. They had been watching, ready for something to happen. Suddenly, the situation felt far bigger than just her cafe. She wasn't merely refusing coffee to a disgraced politician. She was standing against a tide of media and public scrutiny. "Look outside," she said, voice steady despite the flurry of emotion swirling inside her. Mark turned quickly, his demeanor changing. She watched as realization dawned on him, fear flickering in his eyes. For a moment, the confident politician melted away, revealing the man underneath who was just trying to keep his control. "Fine," he said after a tense pause. With that, he grabbed the coffee cup she'd poured and turned toward the door, stepping outside into a storm of flashbulbs and shouted questions. "Mr. Trenton," Julia watched from the counter, her heart racing. The spectacle was overwhelming. This wasn't what she had wanted. She had simply wanted to protect her space. But as the noise of the reporters filled her ears, it also fueled something deep within her, an unexpected feeling of power. The cafe felt charged, alive with energy. Conversations picked back up, but now they were buzzing with excitement, speculation, and hesitation. One customer gasped, "I can't believe you refused to serve him," another said, eyes wide in disbelief and admiration. Julia fought a wave of vulnerability. Was she becoming a part of the story? Had she made an enemy by taking such a bold stand? The warmth of her cafe, a space she worked hard to make inviting, now felt clouded with tension. The hours passed, and though customers continued to trickle in, their conversations were often directed toward the unfolding drama outside. News crews had stationed themselves near the entrance, capturing every moment as Mark faced the consequences of his actions. That night, as she closed up her cafe, nerves twisted in her stomach like a knot. The local news that evening would report not just on Mark's political fallout, but her confrontation. Would people admire her, or would they see her as a target? She flipped the sign to closed, but sleep eluded her that night. Thoughts spiraled in her mind, questioning every aspect of her decision. What if it had been a mistake? What if she had disrupted life in her small town simply by refusing him entry? The next morning, the ramifications of her stand began to unfold. When she opened the cafe, a small group had gathered outside, hands clutching signs, voices mingling with determination. One reader proclaimed. Julia rubbed her eyes, shock ripping through her. They were here for her. She stepped outside, feeling a swell of anxiety and courage wash over her. She asked, voice trembling, "We want to support you." As they shared their thoughts and stories, she felt overwhelmed yet surprisingly grounded. This was not just about refusing service, it represented something deeper. The crowd spoke of their own frustrations with the political climate, a sense of disillusionment that had left many people feeling powerless. In those moments, she saw something glimmering hope. A movement was brewing. Maybe they could bring about change together, and it began with dialogue and a refusal to stay silent. As the morning unfolded, people began pouring into her cafe, energized and inspired. Conversations flowed naturally, ideas exchanged. The cafe transformed from a simple coffee house into a think tank, buzzing with suggestions and passionate discussions. And then came the unthinkable, a call from a local news channel. "We want to feature your story," the reporter said. "You've become a symbol for standing up to political corruption." Mere weeks ago, the thought of being on television made her stomach churn. Now, it filled her with purpose. The opportunity to share her experience and inspire others was a chance she couldn't pass up. Her friend Sarah exclaimed as they wrapped up prepping for the day. "It's not about fame," Julia replied, suddenly feeling a rush of responsibility. As the camera crew arrived the next day, the cafe buzzed with excitement. The crew set up lights, microphones, and cameras, transforming her beloved little cafe into a stage. The interview began, and while the bright lights felt blinding at first, Julia settled into her rhythm. She spoke passionately about the impact of her decision, emphasizing the need for accountability in every level of society. "Every person has the ability to make a choice," she emphasized, "and those choices matter. If you see something wrong, speak up." The producer nodded in approval, and after the interview wrapped, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had shared her truth, and she hoped it would resonate with others. In the days that followed, reports mentioning her cafe filled the airwaves, bringing in patrons from near and far. News anchors talked about Julia's refusal with admiration, how her brave stand resonated with countless others. Lines formed outside her cafe as people came to show their support, proud to be part of a movement advocating for change. Strangers approached her, thanking her for reminding them that sometimes a small act of defiance can create waves. They shared their own stories, some personal, some political, and through it all, Julia felt a growing sense of purpose, a guiding light illuminating her path. As conversations deepened, she felt like she was fostering a mini-revolution, a place where people felt empowered to challenge the status quo. Her cafe had become a haven for change, conversations sparking even more ideas, uniting people who had felt alone in their thoughts. And then, amidst the noise and excitement, Julia noticed a sharp turn in the conversation. As the media caught wind of her success, they began digging deeper into her actions. They would ask. Julia couldn't ignore the sense of oversight. She had played a leading role in this drama, and as much as she wanted to focus on the positive, the weight of her role began to settle in. Would he come for her? Then one afternoon, just as she was preparing to close up, the door swung open, and there he was again, Mark Trenton. This time he seemed different. Gone was the bravado. Instead, he wore an air of defeat. The customers fell silent as he stepped inside, the atmosphere thickening with suspense. Julia's heart raced, wondering what his intentions were. He asked, his voice quieter, almost humble. Taking a deep breath, Julia nodded. She motioned for him to sit at a back corner table, away from the gazes of the customers. Things had changed dramatically since their last encounter, and it felt like the world was about to shift again. "I messed up," he said, looking down at the table. "I don't know how this all got so out of hand." Julia could see the weight of regret etched into his features. "You made choices, Mark, and they affect real people," she replied, her tone steady. He met her gaze, unflinching. "I can't change what I've done, but I want to make it right." She was taken aback, feeling the twist of emotion. He shook his head. "No, I don't expect that, but I want to start somewhere. In that moment, Julia felt the complexity of redemption wrapping around them, a tricky web spun from choices, regrets, and new beginnings. Maybe there was something here, a chance for true change, not just for him, but for the town as a whole. "Change takes more than just words, Mark," she replied carefully. "You'll have to prove it." They spoke for hours, ideas flowing like the coffee they often poured. It became a dialogue about accountability, about the role of leadership, about small, actionable steps. As the cafe closed for the night, Julia realized they were building bridges, ones that connected their fractured community, ones that could potentially heal wounds. Days turned into weeks, and Julia and Mark began collaborating on community workshops focused on accountability and responsibility. They encouraged open forums, teaching people to speak up while giving Mark the chance to show he was earnest about change. And throughout it all, the cafe stood as a testament, a place that had begun with a refusal, branching out to conversations and connections, inspiring a community to rise up and reclaim their voice. The media watched as the story unfolded, transforming from sensationalist narratives of scandal to something more profound, discourse on responsibility, community strength, and the power of a single decision. It was a reminder that sometimes the most small actions can shatter the silence and ignite remarkable change. Mornings after pouring coffee and listening to laughter flowing through her cafe, Julia understood that each cup contained more than just warmth. It held the potential for transformation, a sip of possibility that rippled out into the world beyond. Together, they had faced the fire and emerged reborn, striving not just for survival, but to reshape the landscape around them. And as they watched that light cut through the darkness together, both knew that at any moment, a simple refusal could become the catalyst for something extraordinary. The bell above the cafe door jingled cheerfully, a sound that usually warmed Julia's heart. But today, as she wiped down countertops, an unsettling chill washed over her when she recognized the figure stepping inside. It was Eric Lawson, a local politician known more for his scandals than his service. Just days before, headlines had spilled ink on his shady dealings, and the anger in the community simmered just below the surface. He walked in like he owned the place, his tailored suit fresh and his hair styled perfectly. Julia felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had seen how his presence could turn an ordinary day into a media circus, and she wasn't eager to play a part in it. He greeted, flashing a brilliant smile. For a moment, she was frozen and raced, remembering the stories she had seen, what he had done, the lives he'd impacted. Scraping together her courage, she set the coffee pot down and looked him straight in the eye. His expression shifted from surprise to disbelief. "You heard me," she said firmly, surprising even herself. "This cafe is a safe space. You being here makes people uncomfortable." His smile wavered, turned razor sharp. "You think you can refuse me? No, it's not about the coffee. It's about accountability." A cloud of tension filled the cafe, the kind that made every customer turn to watch. Julia felt the weight of their gazes, a mix of curiosity and silent support. She was terrified but resolved. Eric stepped closer, a hostile edge creeping into his tone. "You're making a huge mistake, Julia." She inhaled deeply, tightening her grip on the counter. "And I can stand by my principles." Suddenly, something caught her eye outside the cafe window. A small group of reporters had gathered, their cameras poised, and she felt the ground underneath her tremble. They had been waiting, and now all eyes were on them. A chill ran through her. "Look outside," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "Do you want to give them a show?" Eric turned to see the throng of reporters, and for a moment she saw the facade crumbling. The bravado that he usually carried like armor slipped away, replaced by a flicker of vulnerability. "Fine," he said, bitterness dripping from his words. "I won't sit here." With that, he snatched up the coffee she'd poured and headed for the door, the tension still thick in the air. Julia stood rooted behind the counter, heart racing. It was over, but she felt anything but relieved. You just challenged someone who could retaliate. As Eric stepped outside, the media unleashed a barrage of questions, cameras flashing like angry horns. "Mr. Lawson," the cafe felt alive, crackling with energy. The customers began talking in hushed whispers, eyes darting between Julia and the spectacle unfolding outside. Someone finally blurted out, eyes wide with shock. Julia felt heat flood her cheeks. "Let's just say I believe in accountability," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. But doubt crept in. Had she done the right thing? Throughout the day, the cafe was electrified by what had transpired. People piled in, drawn by the drama and wanting to support her. Conversations bubbled over, each person unsure but eager to discuss what had unfolded. "I can't believe you told him off," a regular said, shaking his head in awe. Julia smiled weakly, still shaken. "It wasn't just about him, it's about all of us." Word of her stand spread rapidly. The next day, her cafe became a topic of conversation, the buzz reaching a fever pitch. Every customer brought their thoughts, sharing their experiences and frustrations with the political climate. As the media continued to cover Eric's fallout, people began to see Julia as a symbol of resistance. She felt like she was standing at the helm of a movement she neither intended nor fully grasped. And then it happened. Her phone rang with a local news station calling to interview her. "We want to feature your stand against Eric Lawson," the producer said. The weight of those words settled heavily on her shoulders. "Inspiration, but I'm just serving coffee," Julia said, feeling a wave of doubt wash over her. "No," the producer insisted. "What you did mattered." When the crew arrived, cameras, lights, and crew members transformed her small cafe into a stage. Heart racing, Julia tried to remind herself that she was simply sharing her truth. The reporter asked, her voice crisp and inquisitive. "Because sometimes standing up to someone means refusing to let them occupy your space," Julia replied, the words flowing more easily than she expected. The interview wrapped, and Julia felt a rush of exhilaration mixed with anxiety. Did she just become part of something bigger? In the days that followed, her cafe became a gathering place for conversations about integrity and grassroots movements. Every cup of coffee felt charged with purpose, and patrons began exchanging ideas on how to reclaim their voices. They talked about organizing community events, holding forums, and inviting local candidates to discuss accountability openly. And then came the day she received a call from a national news network. "We want you to be featured on a segment," they said, excitement radiating through the phone. She gasped. "Exactly," the producer said. The weight of her new role bore down on her. She was no longer just running a cafe, she was part of a movement for change. On the day of the national broadcast, nerves and adrenaline blended vividly within her. As the camera turned on, Julia felt a surge of purpose. She articulated her thoughts about integrity, transparency, and the power of refusal. Each word felt like a step towards something monumental. Days turned into weeks, and the community rallied behind her. The cafe buzzed with energy, people streamed in, sharing their resolve to create a voice for the marginalized. Julia felt more alive each day. In the whirlwind of it all, she remained vigilant about Eric. Would he retaliate? Would he try to regain his power? One fateful evening, just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, the cafe door opened, and in walked Eric once more. This time, his demeanor was humbled. Customers fell silent as he approached the counter, visibly shaken. He asked, his voice low, almost pleading. Julia echoed, surprise and hesitance battling within her. He gestured to a corner table and took a seat, his eyes downcast. "I didn't expect things to go this way," he said, his bravado stripped away. You were right. This was a different man sitting before her, but the scars of distrust remained. Julia compressed her lips, unsure of her next words. You caused harm, Eric. I know, he replied, shame evident in his tone. But I want to change. I want to help fix what I've broken. Can you let me help you in this community? As they spoke, the weight of their exchange morphed into something profound. An opportunity for redemption shimmered before them, a chance to build bridges instead of walls. Julia asked, perceptively weighing his sincerity. I do, he said, looking her firmly in the eyes. I want to make amends, but I can't do it alone. Julia felt the current of emotions swirling. Could she trust him? Would he truly be committed to change? After what felt like an eternity, she nodded slowly. If you're serious, we can create something together, but accountability is key. Over the next few weeks, the two began collaborating. They held community forums where people could express their thoughts, feelings, and concerns. Eric worked hard to earn back the trust he had lost, using his voice to amplify the ideas that flowed freely in the cafe. It became a haven for open dialogue. News of their collaboration spread, weaving a narrative of redemption where mistakes could be turning points rather than dead ends. Motivated by community support, Eric advocated for changes in local policies while Julia learned the intricacies of political accountability. One evening, as they stood together in the cafe watching the community thrive, Julia felt a sense of accomplishment wash over her. She mused, her heart swelling with pride. Life is unpredictable, Eric replied, a hint of a smile on his lips. We have to adapt, learn, and grow. As the cafe buzzed with laughter and vibrant conversation, Julia understood that sometimes refusal could become a foundation for something beautiful, a catalyst for change that rippled through a community. In the days ahead, they faced challenges, but they also fostered a united spirit among the patrons who had become family. The cafe remained a sacred space, filled with the aroma of coffee and conversation. It served as a reminder that one simple refusal could transform lives, create movements, and weave a tapestry of change. Their journey became a testament not to the struggles they faced, but to the strength that emerged from standing tall in the face of adversity. And as Julia poured coffee for her customers, she realized the power of choices, the small moments that could lead to extraordinary outcomes. It was a story of resilience, growth, and the power of community, a narrative forged in a single moment, but expanded through collaboration, determination, and the unwavering belief that change is possible when anyone dares to stand and refuse. The bell jingled softly as the cafe door swung open, and Mia glanced up from behind the counter. The light outside was warm, casting a golden hue through the glass windows, but her heart raced as she recognized the figure entering. It was Jason Cole, the controversial city councilman whose name had been plastered across news outlets for weeks. Disgraced, he was accused of corruption and misuse of power, yet here he was, stepping into her small cafe as if nothing had happened. Mia's stomach twisted in knots. Instinctively, she wiped her hands on her apron, trying to appear nonchalant as he approached the counter. Dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, he smiled with a disarming charm that had won him votes in the past. But beneath that charming exterior lay the weight of his troubled reputation, one that loomed large in the small community. Morning, I'll have a black coffee, please, he said, his voice smooth and confident. Mia paused, her heart pounding in her chest. Actually, Mr. Cole, she began, taking a deep breath. His smile faltered, replaced by an expression of disbelief. What do you mean? No, it's not just a coffee, she replied, her voice steady but firm. People are uncomfortable. The news is everywhere about you. He leaned closer, the warmth of his charm quickly morphing into something sharper. You really think you can refuse me? Mia felt a flush of adrenaline. And I could stand my ground, Jason. This cafe is a safe space for my customers. A tense silence enveloped them, and Mia could sense eyes turning their way. The cafe buzzed with muted conversations, but now those conversations seemed to hush, all attention focused on the standoff unfolding before them. Jason straightened, the confident demeanor he wore slipping slightly. Come on, it's just a coffee. No, you're asking for more than that, Mia replied, her voice unwavering. You're asking for acceptance in a space where you've hurt people. In that moment, something flickered in his eyes, an uncharacteristic vulnerability that contained the weight of his actions. But before he could respond, Mia stole a glance toward the window. Her heart dropped as she noticed a small group of reporters gathered outside, cameras aimed directly at the cafe. They had been waiting, hungry for a glimpse of drama. Panic surged through her. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was a spectacle, and she had thrust herself into the spotlight. Look outside, she said quietly, urgency threading through her words. Jason turned, his bravado faltering as he processed the reality. The facade of confidence cracked, revealing the man beneath, the very human being who now faced public scrutiny. But he quickly regained his composure, masking the fear lurking behind his eyes. You're making a mistake, he said, though now the words felt more like a plea than a threat. I think it's you who's made a mistake, Mia shot back, fire igniting in her chest. With that, she felt the ground shift beneath her. Jason snatched the cup of coffee she had poured and turned toward the door. The noise outside had increased, shouts blending together, questions laced with anticipation. "Mr. Cole," a reporter yelled as Jason stepped into the throng. The door swung shut behind him and Mia was left standing at the counter, heart racing. It was over, but a mix of elation and dread washed over her. Had she just made a powerful enemy? The atmosphere in the cafe buzzed with disbelief and excitement, an electric current coursing through the air. A customer finally exclaimed, excitement lighting up their eyes. "I can't believe you did that," another said, leaning in closer. "I'm not most people," Mia replied, her voice steady but mixed with uncertainty. "I can't ignore what he's done." As the day progressed, patrons poured in, eager to discuss the confrontation they had witnessed. The media frenzy surged outside the cafe, and Mia could hear snippets of the chaos through the windows. What had once been a quiet coffee shop now resonated with murmurs of support and admiration, but she couldn't shake the unsettling feeling gnawing at her. Had she truly crossed a line? Was her refusal an act of bravery or a naive mistake? As evening fell, she closed up the cafe, her mind racing. The day had shifted so dramatically, yet she was left feeling uncertain. And just when she thought the spectacle would fade, she received a phone call from a local news station asking to interview her. "You've become a voice for the community, Mia. People want to hear your thoughts," the producer insisted. "Me," she protested, her voice trembling slightly. "No, you become so much more. You stood your ground. That matters," the producer urged. Sometime later, she found herself sitting at a table in her cafe with a microphone clipped to her shirt, lights focused on her face. The reporter sat across from her, encouraging her to share her feelings about the confrontation with Jason Cole. The reporter asked, eyes fixed, waiting for her answer. Mia felt her heart race again, but she lifted her chin, finding her resolve. Because this cafe belongs to the community. It's a place for honesty and warmth, not for someone who has betrayed that trust. The interview wrapped, and as the producer thanked her, Mia felt a sense of empowerment washing over her. Perhaps refusing him wasn't just an act of defiance, it was the spark of change. In the days that followed, people flocked to the cafe, drawn by her story. Conversations buzzed with hope and a sense of camaraderie, and each cup of coffee felt infused with purpose. Regulars and newcomers alike shared their own stories, connecting through shared experiences and frustrations with the political climate. People brought in signs proclaiming their support, filling the cafe with an air of unyielding hope. Mia couldn't believe the warmth surrounding her. Just days ago, she felt alone in her stance, but now it seemed the community had united. "Your stand has inspired so many, Mia," said a woman who had been a regular for years. "You've shown us that we can speak out." But as the warmth spread, so did the fear of potential backlash. Thoughts of Jason weighed heavily on her. Would he retaliate? Would this endanger the very space she had built? Then came another phone call, this time from a national news outlet. "We want to feature you on our program to discuss your stand against corruption," the producer announced. Mia felt her heart leap and then sink. "What if it backfires?" she asked, apprehensive. The producer's voice was calm. "You've done something courageous." With mixed feelings swirling in her gut, Mia agreed. On the day of the broadcast, cameras filled the cafe, lights blaring as the producer adjusted the backdrop. Mia felt every heartbeat thump in her chest, anxiety bubbling just beneath the surface. She could do this. She needed to do this. As the segment went live, she shared her story, speaking candidly about her decision, her values, and the sense of community that had arisen from her refusal. The words felt powerful as they spilled from her mouth, each one resonating with every person who had supported her. "You don't have to accept what's wrong," Mia declared on camera, her voice steady. With that broadcast, word spread like wildfire. The cafe became a hub for those wanting to reclaim their voices, and excitement filled the air like the smell of fresh coffee brewing. But as Jason's name flickered across the news, the anticipation twisted. Her heart sank. She knew retribution would come. One day, just a week later, as Mia prepared for the morning rush, the cafe door swung open with a heavy thud. Jason stood there, the sunlight catching the edges of his tailored suit, but this time he looked different. There was no swagger, no cocky smile. Instead, he looked like someone who had lost a battle. Mia asked, her heart racing. He stepped cautiously toward her, the weight of regret lining his features. His voice was low, almost pleading. She hesitated, still feeling the sting of their last encounter, but as she looked into his eyes, she saw something else there, an unfamiliar vulnerability. "Fine," she sighed, gesturing to the corner table. He took a seat, his demeanor more subdued this time. "I know I've messed up," he admitted, staring down at the table. "I didn't take your refusal seriously, but watching the fallout." Mia narrowed her eyes, the flicker of skepticism igniting within her. "And what do you think?" "No," he replied, looking her in the eye, "but I want to change. I want to make what's wrong right. If you'll let me work with you, I believe we can create something positive." Julia felt a mixture of emotions swirl within her, a tangle of anger, skepticism, and perhaps a hint of curiosity. Could he actually mean it? "We're all tired of the games, Jason," she replied, catching her breath. "If you want to change, you have to earn that trust." "I know," he said, nodding earnestly. "But I'm ready to do whatever it takes." As their conversation unfolded, Mia felt walls beginning to crumble. He spoke with conviction, sharing his desire to atone for his mistakes to build something meaningful. Amidst the cautious atmosphere, a spark ignited a possibility she had never imagined. They ended up talking for hours, diving deep into the vision of what could be, a dialogue about community engagement, accountability, and ways to foster transparency. It was a turning point, one that opened the door for unexpected collaboration. Days turned to weeks, and together they began organizing community events focused on transparency. They hosted open forums, allowing residents to express their concerns and fears, reclaiming their voice in the community. People began to trust Jason again, slowly but surely. The cafe remained a haven, a meeting ground where ideas flourished and conversations bloomed. Months later, as the sun dipped below the horizon casting a golden glow, Mia found herself sitting with Jason in the cafe, surrounded by friends and the vibrant community they had cultivated together. The laughter and chatter felt like warmth spreading, bringing a sense of unity. "I never thought I'd enjoy this, but it feels good to be part of something," Jason said, smiling at the scene before them. Mia nodded, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. "Sometimes it takes a refusal to spark change," she said softly, looking around at the faces illuminated by the light around them. In that moment, she understood that refusing to sit someone at her cafe had led to a collective awakening, one that rippled through the community and brought forth a chance for transformation. As the laughter echoed around her and warmth enveloped the room, Mia realized that sometimes the most unexpected moments could lead to extraordinary outcomes. In that small cafe, she had not only fought for her values, but had ignited a flame of resilience, healing, and community that no one could take away. And with each new cup poured, a new story was born, one she was proud to be a part of. The door to the cafe swung open, letting in a gust of cool air, but it wasn't the brisk wind that sent a shiver down Sophie's spine. It was the man stepping through the threshold, Senator Mark Lawson. He was tall, with sharp features and an air of authority. He had been a prominent figure in local politics, but lately his reputation was marred with allegations of corruption and deceit. Sophie had been following the news closely, and his face had become a symbol of everything that felt wrong in her town. As he approached the counter, his charming smile lit up the room, but Sophie felt her heart race. He clearly had not a care in the world. He said, the kind of cheerfulness that felt disingenuous against the backdrop of his scandals. His brow furrowed for a brief moment, surprise flashing across his face. "What do you mean you can't serve me?" "No, it's not just coffee," she said, feeling a rush of determination. "This cafe is a space for people to feel comfortable, and right now people are uncomfortable with you here." He stepped closer, the sweet charm fading into something colder. "You really think you can refuse me? I'm a senator." "Maybe you could," Sophie said, meeting his gaze unflinching. "But I won't let you use this place for your political games." The cafe fell silent, the low hum of conversation fading into an awkward stillness. Other patrons turned to watch the confrontation unfold, some wide-eyed, others nodding in solidarity with her courage. She could feel the weight of their attentiveness, an electric tension crackling in the air. "Fine," he said, the mask of charm slipping further. As he turned to leave, something caught her eye outside the cafe window. Her stomach sank. A small group of reporters had gathered across the street, cameras poised. They had been waiting, anticipating something big. Sophie's heart raced as she realized this was going to become a spectacle. She had not only confronted a politician, but she had also thrown herself into the public eye. Jason opened the cafe door and stepped out, the reporters instantly swarming him. "Senator Lawson," someone shouted. Sophie felt a mix of dread and exhilaration. She had just ignited something far bigger than her cafe. The moment was heavy with consequence, and she was acutely aware of how the entire situation could spiral out of control. Back inside, patrons began whispering among themselves, gauging each other's reactions. One of her regulars, an older woman named Margaret, asked, eyes wide with a blend of shock and admiration. "I don't know," Sophie replied, feeling her confidence waver. "No," Margaret insisted, shaking her head. "It took guts." Sophie felt a warm flush of gratitude but couldn't shake the gnawing sense of anxiety sitting heavy in her chest. The door swung open again and a fresh breeze swept through, carrying with it a surge of chaos from outside. The media circus had only begun. Customers shuffled in, their earlier conversations now spinning around the senator who had just walked out. Someone mused. Sophie responded, though doubt trickled through her bravado. Hours passed and the cafe buzzed with energy, but attention lingered beneath the surface. Sophie busied herself with coffee orders, trying to clear her mind, but her thoughts kept straying back to Jason. What would he do? Would her refusal inspire others, or would it spark a backlash that could ripple through the community, endangering the sanctuary she had built? That night, as Sophie closed up, she felt the weight of the day's events pressing down on her. After locking the door and shutting off the lights, she stared into the empty cafe, a mix of fear and pride swelling within her. Suddenly, her phone buzzed sharply against the counter. A text message popped up from her friend Lisa. "Did you see the news?" Sophie felt her heart race as she opened the news app. Her breath caught in her throat. She clicked through the article, reading quotes from her confrontation, beautifully edited to capture her resolve. The whole world was watching. The night rolled on, and soon enough her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. With a mixture of curiosity and dread, she answered. A cool voice asked on the other end, "This is Carla from the news station." Sophie could hardly comprehend the words. "Oh, okay," she replied, still reeling from the article that had just been published. "We want to capture your story. You become the voice of the community, and we'd love to feature you." "Sure," she managed to reply, her voice trembling with a mix of excitement and fear. After they hung up, Sophie sat in silence, the gravity of the situation settling in. She had stood her ground, but now she was thrust into the spotlight. The anticipation thrilled her, but also left her anxious. The next morning felt surreal. As she walked into the cafe, she felt the weight of her decision growing heavier. The door swung open early, revealing the news crew that had arrived to film her. Carla beamed as she walked in, a camera following her every move. Sophie took a deep breath, trying to ground herself. "Hi." The crew set up their equipment while Sophie poured coffee for the few early customers. As the cameras began rolling, Carla prompted her to share her story. With each word she spoke, relief washed over her, the realization that she was part of something bigger. "I believe we need to hold our leaders accountable," she said, her voice steady as she spoke to the camera. Carla asked, leaning in, her curiosity piqued. "I hope so," Sophie replied, feeling conviction in her words. "Change starts small." The interview wrapped up, and as the crew packed away, Sophie felt a surge of pride. Perhaps she could make an impact after all. However, as the day unfolded, unease crept in again. The cafe became a hotspot, a gathering place for discussions about politics and accountability. But beneath the excitement was an undercurrent of tension. With every cup she poured, Sophie wondered about Jason. Would he retaliate? Would he view this burgeoning movement as something to squash? Just then, the bell jingled again. The door swung open, and her heart sank as she recognized him entering. Jason stood in the doorway, the vibrant sunlight catching his serious demeanor, a stark contrast to his usual confidence. The buzz in the cafe fell to a hush as customers turned to look at him. Jason stepped forward, his expression somber. He said, his voice low. Sophie felt a rush of emotion. She couldn't tell if it was anger, fear, or something else entirely. She asked, keeping her distance. "Look, I know I messed up," he admitted, glancing around at the curious faces in the cafe, "but I want to do better." The weight of his words hit her like a tidal wave. He was here asking for redemption in the very place she had stood her ground against him. Customers eyed each other, their expressions a mix of disbelief. Sophie echoed, incredulity rising within her. "After everything that's happened." "As I'm serious," he said, desperation creeping into his tone. "I can use my position to bring attention to issues that matter." The cafe felt charged with energy, the air thick with emotion. Sophie's heart raced as she processed his words. Could she trust him? Was this a genuine move toward change, or merely a strategy to regain his lost image? She challenged, crossing her arms defensively. "I know," he replied, frustration evident in his voice, "but I've realized that's not who I want to be." Silence hung in the air as customers exchanged uncertain glances. Some seemed ready to dismiss him entirely, while others were intrigued. Mia's spiraling emotions led her to search his gaze, trying to decipher the truth. Was he sincere, or was this yet another ploy? Before she could respond, the door swung open again, this time ushering in another wave of confusion. A group of reporters flooded in, notebooks and cameras at the ready. They had caught wind of Jason's arrival, and the tension thickened. "Mr. Lawson," a reporter shouted, thrusting a microphone into his face. Sophie and Jason exchanged glances, understanding dawning upon them. They were trapped in a storm they could neither control nor contain. Jason stepped forward, facing the media as if emerging from behind a curtain of shadows. "I'm here to take responsibility," he announced, his voice resonating with newfound determination. "I want to support the community, to be a part of the change." The reporters pounced, their questions a storm of curiosity. One asked. Mia felt her heart race again, a rush of adrenaline surging through her. The weight of the moment pressed on her chest, and yet as she stood there, she felt a flicker of something. Was it hope? Perhaps this could be a turning point, something that could reshape everything she thought she knew about him. But the moment hung delicately, a fragile thread ready to snap. Would Jason's words lead to genuine change, or were they just a strategy for survival? As the crowd's questions swirled, the world around her felt like it could tip either way. In the heart of the chaos, Sophie stood at a precipice, caught between the past and an uncertain future. This was the moment that would define everything. With every heartbeat echoing in her ears, she prepared to make a choice that could change everything, for her, for Jason, and for the community she had fought so hard to protect. Would she confront the complexities of giving him another chance, or would she refuse once more, solidifying a line that had already been drawn? The air crackled with uncertainty, and as the cameras rolled and words exchanged, time stood still. Sophie's next move would be everything.